Right, and right before we went on break, I was speaking to Professor Elijah Munyi from the United States International USIU here in Nairobi, just talking about this particular inauguration, historic day today is, and now we're also joined by Jarvis Bigambo, who is a governance specialist. Many thanks for joining us this morning. And we couldn't hear much from that clip there, but of course, Trump expected to already sign in executive actions. And I think one of the early tests that he will have is on policies on healthcare. We've seen that he expects Congress to repeal and completely overhaul, President Obama's, healthcare policies we have. So what do we expect? Can we expect a complete overhaul of that healthcare policy, Obamacare?
Well, to start off, of course, Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution establishes and bestows such executive power on the person of the president. And in this case, the 45th President Donald Trump, upon being sworn in. And it is, of course, anticipated that he'll have a raft of changes and executive orders that would contradict or repeal that which his predecessor, upon such swearing in, Obama, has signed in the previous times, and even up to perhaps his 11th hour in office. Well, while that is expected because of the manner in which Donald Trump has conducted himself, his campaigns, his understanding of issues, and if you look at even his tweets and his pronouncements, which speak to even his understanding and the dimension of his foreign policy, ours would be the expectation, for instance, that even though he will have the power to do all these things, he must do so with a tincture of consciousness on what the general Americans expect. There are over 300 Americans, 300 million Americans, who are inhabitants of this country, expect that the person inhabiting the office of the president should be a person who is conscious enough to the plight, the welfare, and the needs of all Americans, not just those who are in support of his party. He should be careful, of course, not to go down in history adding up to the list of some of the worst presidents in the United States history.
But one would say he really doesn't care about that.
Some of them who have actually been racist, and Trump may actually be accused of the same, perhaps. When you look at the kind of, the manner in which other presidents, for example, Calvin Coolidge or James Polk and others across history who've conducted themselves in such a manner as Trump. However, of course, we must also appreciate that to a very great extent, Trump risks, in a way, alienating America, much as America cannot be fully alienated. Because, for instance, his pronouncements already before even getting into office have dealt a death blow to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. And you can see that China itself is rising to stand in that gap. And this could be just the perfect chance for the BRICS to establish themselves more seriously, entrench their economic interests across the world. Here we're talking about Brazil, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about India, we're talking about, and all this, and China. And this is likely to tilt
but I see
global
Professor
economic issues.
But
I think, unlike Jarvis, I have reservations about what he can actually do domestically. I think the domestic changes, whatever we want, for instance, Obamacare, I think it's going to be a bit more complicated than he thinks he can.
Right, because it's a very complex system.
It's a very complex, and it does involve Congress, which is, of course, is not just Republican, even if they have the majority. But I think it's going to be a bit more contested. But I think in matters of foreign policy, like TTIP, and Syria policy, I think it does have the ability to actually effect some rather swift measures, which are about executive office. So I think, for instance, with regards to ISIS, we might see something going on in Syria, particularly because he's in a good working relationship with Russia.
Let's hold that.